Hi, everybody. So glad you're all here with us today. So I'm Megan, manager of Two Bright Lights, and we have a great webinar planned for you today. I'm super excited. We have partnered up with Catalyst Wedding Co. for some great educational webinars over the past couple months, and this one is going to be fantastic. So before we kick things off into the actual content, I wanted to pass it off to Jen from Catalyst, who can tell you a little bit about that and then also give you our real introduction. So I will stop talking now because you don't want to hear from me and pass it off to Jen.
Hey everybody, so I am Jen Smacco. I'm the CEO of Catalyst Wedding Co. We are a print and digital wedding publication that is really focused on trying to bring more diversity and inclusion to the wedding industry. And one thing that you may not know about us is that our entire website is run on Squarespace. So we are a huge fan of Squarespace, and we also are a huge fan of people who know how to make Squarespace do what you need it to do to run an awesome business. So I am thrilled to introduce Christy. Christy is a Richmond-based designer and Squarespace expert and has been a longtime supporter and friend to Catalyst. So welcome, Christy.
Thanks. Hey guys. So I'm super stoked to be here and share this. I will say that we're definitely going to touch on some stuff that is really particular to Squarespace, but a lot of what we'll go over today is big picture in terms of really designing a site that will help accomplish your goals. And so I work with Campfire & Co. We're a small design and branding agency here in Richmond. And we're really passionate about bringing brands to all touch points with clients. So that goes from interiors to websites to graphic design, kind of spanning all those disciplines. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and please ask questions in the chat box if you want to interrupt and we can talk about something, or we can do Q&A at the end. Yeah, so let me just get this going. Sweet. Okay. So yeah, creating an awesome Squarespace website. This webinar is going to be pretty dope, hopefully. This is something random I said, and our designer, John, decided to toss this into the presentation. Let me make sure I got it going on here. Okay, yeah, so I mentioned a couple of these things. I'm Christy. I had longer hair when that photo was taken. I'm here because really, I really love Squarespace. We use it for basically exclusively as a platform for all of our clients that we do web work for, unless there's a really particular platform need in terms of, you know, if you've got some really serious, robust functionality needs, you know, WordPress might be the way to go, but we find that so many of our clients find everything they need and more through Squarespace. And bad websites are really boring and they make me sad. And so I want to teach people how to make better ones because it's really not that hard. Yeah. Okay, so in order to kind of give you guys some ideas on how to create a good website, I feel like we need to define what makes a website good and bad. So things that we think really make a website awesome are it's memorable. It really stands out. It creates an awesome experience for clients, and after they leave it, they remember that it was an enjoyable experience, or at least not a bad experience. It's easy to use. We want people to be able to quickly find where they're going and find the information they're looking for in an intuitive and sort of simple way. And finally, at Campfire, we really feel like all of your design work should have some connection to your overall strategy as a business. And that's really about defining goals and making sure that the things that you put out there as far as client touch points and are designed in a manner to actually accomplish what you want to accomplish. So what makes a website bad? Odds are you've probably been to a website and sort of consider like, this wasn't like the best experience. And there's probably a couple reasons why. First of all, it's hard to search. Like how many of how many times have you gone to Google and searched a website and you were searching in the exact name of that company and the location, and you've still got to scroll down to find out where it is? That is super, super frustrating. And if it's frustrating for you, it's probably really frustrating for your clients as well. Second of all, it's confusing. If you're looking for a certain type of information or a way to get in touch and you can't figure it out, that's definitely a big hang up in making an online experience uncomfortable, to say the least. And then finally, it's not responsive. So what I mean by responsive, if you're not familiar with that term, is that the website automatically changes to adjust based on the width of the browser that you're using. So that can be a large desktop screen, it can be your tablet, it can be your mobile device, whatever it is. So who cares? Why does this even matter? I've got a couple, I won't like bore you guys with a bunch of statistics, but I do have a couple of statistics that I wanted to share that are really powerful. And so 38% of folks will just stop engaging with your website if they just find it visually unappealing, which is a lot of people. 75% of consumers will just judge your company's credibility completely based on your website design. So if your website is, you know, too minimal or too hard to use or too boring or too outdated looking, that means 75% of people looking at it are going to say, nope, I think I'll go on to the next one. 57% of users say they won't recommend a business with a poorly designed website. I feel like I'm definitely in that camp. If I land on a website, and even if I think it's a great company, sometimes sort of like, yeah, don't judge them based on this website, but you know, I still think they're a good company. It's definitely going to put you a notch below your competition. And finally, I wanted to point out that there was a recent study on 2017, and of all global online traffic, 52% of online users are on their mobile device. So it's really, really imperative that your website look good on mobile. So what can we do about this, right? So we're kind of defining what works and what doesn't work, and how can you make sure that your site is actually aligning with some of these ideas here. So I've kind of put together 8 topics here that we'll go over in terms of setting up your website for success. And the first one, this is something that as a branding agency and as sort of a strategic design partner for our clients, we always, always, always start with, who are we talking to? If you don't know who you're talking to, then your website doesn't necessarily have a direction or a focus or any way to measure whether or not you're succeeding. So in order to figure out who your audience is, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have thought about this hopefully already, but just a couple quick tips. Listing your top few clients and kind of looking at who are they, what do they care about, what matters to them is a really great place to get started. Reviewing your analytics is another really great one. Checking out who's on your website, who's on especially your social media, which tends to give you a lot more specific details of like who's following you, how old are they, where do they live. And then finally, say you're just starting out and you're still not quite sure, you don't have enough followers or enough analytic data at this point to figure out who's really there and who's listening. You can design your dream client. We would highly encourage you to do this even if you have current clients. Understanding who you want to work with and put some parameters on that will help you start to figure out what your website should do to accommodate them. So once you've kind of created that list, there's a couple of key things to consider. Ask yourself, you know, what issues are you actually helping your client solve? What are their questions or hesitations in terms of hiring you? What gets them excited? And what will make their lives easier in terms of what you offer or the experience of engaging with your website? And consider how your site might be able to either alleviate some of these, sort of confirm that you're going to be able to solve their issues, and also sort of have an experience that's delightful at the same time. So goals. Now you know who's going to be there and what they need to do. Create some measurements to figure out what will be successful once they're there. So some parameters for that. Big picture, hopefully as a business, you have set some sort of strategic goals for yourself, whether that's like short-term or long-term, but consider how your website can help support those. It's sort of one of those things that we tend to kind of leave over here. And at the end of everything, we're like, okay, we'll put some data on our website and make sure people have some content, but make sure that you include your website in terms of your marketing planning and your strategic planning. What do your clients need to do on your website? And also, what do you want them to do on your website? Make sure that you have an answer to those questions and that you have some type of action that corresponds on the site. You make sure you want to consider your future self. How much time do you actually want to work on your website? And how can your website make your life easier? You don't necessarily always have to be thinking about your clients. You also want to consider how can you set up the site to be something that you'll be able to use in the future, whether that's meeting with a client and you can refer back to something on your site, whether clients ask you, say, the same 3 or 4 questions early in the process, you've got a blog post that answers those questions. Really consider how your website can be part of your process to make things more efficient for you internally. And then finally, with your goals, you want to make sure that you've got some sort of really obvious call to action for each of those things. When you consider what you want folks to do and how you want them to feel, is there some type of action that's associated with that? Is that, contact us? Is it sign up for a newsletter? Is it, make sure you read the blog? Whatever kind of actual action you want them to take other than just reading information. Make sure that's really obvious. So the next step in what I would say is really part of Campfire's process, especially when we're starting with a client on a website, is to map it out. And I think this can be helpful whether or not you already have a website or you're creating a new site. So this is sort of a kind of loose, some imagery of our process, how we kind of do this. But basically, on the left side, that image is for a client that we'd worked with that had an existing site, and we wanted to redo the site. And so what we did was we took note cards and we wrote down basically every single bit of content that was on that site, and we laid it all out in the current format. And then we looked at what is the most important thing we need here? When do we want people to find it? How do we want people to move through that content? Is the important content buried on the 4th page at the bottom? Is the blog obvious when you get to the home page? Is our contact information clear and easy to find? So there's some really important things that can come out of that process of making sure that your content is organized in a way that makes sense. And oftentimes, especially as we're, small businesses, we're kind of doing a lot of this stuff on our own. It's hard to take time to pause and say, like, did I organize this properly? Because you tend to jump from like idea to actually executing a site, or at least I would, without this process. And really taking the time to map it out in a thoughtful manner can go a long way to creating a more enjoyable experience online. And then customize it. So what's great about Squarespace, and really what's great about, living in 2018, where we have an incredible access to, off-the-shelf design, whether that is Squarespace or Creative Market or places where you're downloading templates and things like that, I would highly encourage you to take advantage of those types of things, but consider that if you're not adding another layer of customization, you're not really differentiating yourself through the access to those sort of off-the-shelf templates. So there's a couple, key things with Squarespace that I think makes a lot of sense. And I mean, this is really not just with Squarespace, with any template or platform. But one of the main things I think that people obviously see are sort of like colors and typefaces, which are something that we all kind of realize are something that you can easily update and change. And sort of brand to your own brand. So lots of folks do that. A couple ones where I feel like maybe people forget. One of them is copy. So how are the words written on your site? Is your brand personality and tone of voice coming across in the copy? Are you saying sign up for my newsletter? Or are you saying get some rad emails in your inbox? I'll only email you once a month, promise. Things like that where you can really add an extra layer of customization and sort of uniqueness. Imagery is another big one. At this point, we have a lot of access to pretty high quality stock imagery. But make sure that you're not sort of just using only the 5 free stock images that, 18 other websites are using for, these like really beautiful flat lay headers, which are great. Sometimes it's nice to be like, okay, actually, I'm going to look a little bit deeper, try a little bit harder, maybe either take a little bit of my own photography, or I'm going to, invest a little bit in pulling together some images that really are unique to your brand. Additionally, I would challenge you to consider what is the overall art direction and feel of those images. Are you kind of just choosing images because they're free stock images and kind of going with that because it's sort of easy? Or do you really feel like the very bright, minimal, lots of white space is actually tailored to your specific brand? So imagery is a big one that can go a long way in terms of customizing your site. And then the last two, contact forms are a huge one that we talk about a lot with clients. This is a super, super simple thing that sometimes is less obvious. What do you want to get as far as information from your clients? When you consider getting a lead on your website and someone reaches out and asks you for, information on your services, what is the most valuable information for you to have the moment you get that email? Make sure your contact form is actually asking those questions. It can also help you sort of weed out people that may not be a great fit for you. If you have something on there, let's say you make custom furniture and you know that you've gotten a lot of inquiries from clients that are just looking for a quick, I want a table for $100. And every time you get one of those emails, you have to say, hey, actually, that's not really what we do. Our prices are this, and actually we kind of do this type of work. We don't really do tables. So then you've just taken an hour out of your day to respond to an email for someone that's probably not going to become a client. So consider how your contact form can actually focus in on those things. Is it asking people what their budgets are? Is it asking them about particular services? So you have the ability to list services and then they can choose one so that they know that they're reaching out to you to get a service that you actually offer and want to do. And in Squarespace, there are a billion ways to customize that contact form. So definitely take advantage of that. And then tone and personality, I think we touched on that briefly, but just making sure that the copy and the imagery and the typefaces and everything kind of shares that same cohesive tone and personality of your brand. And then finally on this section, really thinking through, this is a great time to actually pause and do a little bit of research. Who are your competitors and how are they customizing their site? How can you make sure that you differentiate yourself slightly? Who are your brand crushes? This is something we talk about a lot with our clients in terms of what other companies are there out there that you look to and think, that person or that organization is really, they've hit the mark and they've made a beautiful website or they've made an awesome brand that I love receiving their emails or whatever it is. Glean what you can from that information and those precedents. And then finally, I think a lot of times we tend to only look at other folks that are in our industry, specific competitors. And especially with website design, I would really encourage you to look outside of your industry for other folks that are doing cool stuff with their website and finding ways to engage with their clients in unique and different ways visually and through the copy, etc. Third-party workarounds. So this is something too that builds on that idea of working with templates. There are a lot of really amazing things about what Squarespace offers, not only, built in with those template designs, but also with a lot of the third-party connections that they integrate automatically. And so some of those, if you're using Squarespace, you'll know it integrates very easily with MailChimp. But not everybody uses MailChimp for one reason or another. And we worked with a client that was really into using Constant Contact. And so we did a little bit of research, and we found that Zapier would be a great third-party workaround, because basically Squarespace would connect with a Google Sheet. So they would send emails directly to a Google Sheet, but they wouldn't send it to Constant Contact. So we set up Zapier to say, hey, every time a new email address gets plopped onto this Google Sheet, automatically take it over to Constant Contact and stick it in my Constant Contact list here. So we set up the Zapier one time, and it's like an automatic, you don't have to think about it sort of connection. And now we're able to connect Squarespace with Constant Contact, and the client doesn't have to do anything. So that's a really simple one that has a lot of like far-reaching abilities in terms of trying to push Squarespace to be able to accomplish what you want to do with it. And then these are just a couple other ones. Typeform is a great one for making really beautiful forms. If there's something you want that's a little bit more robust maybe than that contact form, but maybe not quite as DIY looking as like a Google form, Typeform is a great place. Localist is a calendar platform that we've worked with previously. Mindbody, online booking for like wellness is something else that you can sort of integrate. And then there's a couple more. There's a really, really broad community of Squarespace users and developers that have probably tried one form or another, almost any third-party connection to Squarespace. So I would encourage you to do even the teeniest bit of research to see if that has already been done and someone's probably written down exactly how to do it. Searchability. Obviously, SEO is something that's important to all of us, and Squarespace does have some limitations in terms of SEO compared to, say, WordPress. But I do think that they're definitely growing in that area, and there are some few simple things you can do to really make it extra worth your while. So if you do any kind of research on SEO, some of the most important aspects of confirming your SEO is on point are site titles, page titles, blog titles, headings, image titles, blogs, and then your physical location. So these are really simple things that you don't have to have a really robust understanding of SEO to input these into your site. So on the left here, I'm showing basically this is the settings on your page, right? So on our site, we've got a navigation title. It says work, which is sort of our portfolio. And instead of just, what Squarespace will automatically do is just title your page title the same thing as your navigation. And you can basically add whatever you want here. This will show up in sort of the top tab if you're in like a tabbed browser. But what it does is it's something that search engines will grab higher than the copy. And so I would encourage you to sort of add important search terms here. Your URL is not what you want to change, hopefully. This is really what's going to help folks understand where they are on your site when they're looking at the browser tab. And then image titles is another sort of tedious one that can be really easy to forget about, but I would really encourage you to set aside some time either to comb through your site and update your image titles. And then as you add new projects or other portions to your site, make sure that you take the extra step to title that something that is helpful. Images tend to pop up a little bit easier sometimes than direct searches on Google. And folks often, especially if you're in an image-heavy industry like photography or design, that's somewhere where folks are often looking and searching is just in Google search. And so that's a great one to make sure that you've sort of titled it something that will make sense to search engines. I'll say that we had a client, we did a website for a wedding venue, and we had another individual reach out to us and basically say, I loved that website. And so I searched, Seven Springs, Virginia website. And because we had titled our images properly, our website came up, and they were able to reach out directly to the designer who did the site, even though we didn't have any advertising or anything on the actual website. So that was sort of a really nice use of that tip. So just two more here. We've got test it. It seems really, really obvious that you would obviously go through your site and test it, but a lot of times, especially as small companies, we forget about this, and we're sort of like, cool, it's live, I'm done with it, I'm moving on. But this is really, really, really important. If you have some type of purchase funnel on your site, whether that's like a download or an event or something, a product, make sure that you have gone through that entire process, not just kind of playing the motions, but really actually purchasing it, paying for it, seeing what email comes back in your inbox, seeing what every page of that process looks like, to confirm that it is either, you know, styled appropriately, that it is intuitive, that it's easy to use, that you enjoy. And then hopefully, you know, with Squarespace, a lot of times you even going through that process, you'll realize like, oh, I can customize this page and I didn't realize I could. So that's really important that you actually go through it. So you make sure that all of your billing and everything like that is set up. And then make sure you're filling out your forms too. Make sure you understand where they go and what they look like when they actually come into your inbox. I feel like one of the worst things ever is to have a contact form on your website and then not realize that you're not getting them, or to have people reaching out and you're not responding appropriately because you don't see them. Make sure you know exactly what that subject looks like when it comes into your inbox, and add that to your, you know, trusted contacts, and devise a way that to be able to respond quickly to inquiries. And then finally, don't forget to update your site. You know, it's a really, really important aspect of being on a website, especially if it's something that, you know, potential clients might come to more than once before deciding to hire you, that there's some type of newness happening, that people are seeing that you're an active company, that you're still around. There's a lot of turnover in the small business world, and there's nothing worse than going to a site and then realize that maybe that company doesn't exist anymore, or to even think that about a company that does exist just because they haven't updated their blog in 2 years or something. So a couple things on Squarespace, you know, changing out images is super, super simple. So make sure that you're swapping out header images or big photos every once in a while, so people come back and realize, oh, wow, that's neat, I haven't seen that before. Social media, if you guys are already heavy in social media, your website should really be taking advantage of that. This is just sort of a screenshot on the right side of our site. On our homepage, we've just got, you know, an Instagram feed, which is a really, really easy thing to set up with Squarespace. I would highly encourage you to do that if you're not already utilizing it, especially if you're active on social. You know, there's little bits of copy that you can update occasionally. Of course, your blog, if you do some kind of newsletter, and of course events. If you're utilizing those things, make sure that they're updated often enough, and that if you are updating them, that people are seeing them, so that they're on your homepage or they're somewhere where it's easy to access. And then finally, I'll say with updating your site, make sure that you're designing a website that you can actually maintain and sustain. So if you have an event page on your site and you have a blog and you have social media, if you can't actually on a monthly, weekly, daily basis keep up with all of those things, then it just makes your website look stale because you have a blog that hasn't been updated in months and months. Or if your blog has dates on it in Squarespace, you can take that off. So don't show dates if you don't actually plan or have the bandwidth to update that. Find out ways to make your site easy to maintain so that you on your end can actually accomplish what you set out to accomplish. And yeah, that's basically it. So hopefully you guys found some good tips and info. This is really honestly a direct page out of Campfire's website design book in terms of setting clients up for success. And if you guys have any specific questions about Squarespace or web design in general, I would love to answer them.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy. That was great. I definitely learned some stuff on here. And I can totally agree with you about making sure you update things, because I think we've all been there and been in the position where we maybe are looking at somebody's website and seeing that they haven't blogged in a while, or being that person who hasn't blogged in a while.
Yeah, totally.
But that was awesome. So I want to give people time to throw questions into the chat. So please, if you have any questions at all, throw them in there. I know Elizabeth had asked a question in the beginning when you were talking about giving good impressions about websites and things like that. One of them, the question was, what about images that don't load quickly enough? But then I think another thing, like, how do you make sure your images load quickly?
Yeah. So, I mean, a huge one with that is really the size of your images. If you're not saving your images for web, which is sort of a different, DPI or PPI. So instead of having, especially when you're in the wedding industry, a lot of times you get really, really big, beautiful photos from photographers that are like 300 DPI and they're like, 20 feet wide or something. Find a decent photo editing software and make sure that you're properly saving them for web. And a lot of times, you can do a little bit of searching. Some platforms will, like MailChimp and stuff, will say like, hey, this image is too big, but there's some standard sizes in terms of how large your image is going to be, how many images you're putting on a page. And then there's a couple other in Squarespace in the settings. I want to say it's called Ajax loading, but there's a couple other things that will basically, instead of, Squarespace has some options where instead of basically the whole page having to load before anything shows up, it will just load what is in your screen and then kind of load as you move down if you've got a really, really large page. So look into some of those settings in Squarespace, but definitely just making sure that if you're putting a 3,000 pixel wide image on your blog, which is actually only got a footprint of like 800 pixels, then it's definitely going to take longer for that to load.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So Stephanie has a question.
Yeah.
So she says, I have clients contacting me through my contact form and my responses are going to their junk mail. Is that a mail issue or a website issue?
Without knowing exactly what your platform is, Stephanie, I'm not entirely sure. I think that may have something to do, sometimes it has to do with like, how long that subject line is. If the subject line gets super, super long, it can kind of think that that's spam. One of the things you could also do is instead of just replying directly to that email, you could start a new email basically, and then kind of copy and paste their contact info or whatever they had said in their original email below. Maybe starting a new email might be better, but I would think if that's definitely never happened that I know of in Squarespace. But I would consider probably just starting a new email if that's definitely going direct to junk, because that probably has something to do with maybe the URL that it's coming from. That's a really vague answer. I'm sorry. It's hard to know without like more specific details.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something with the subject line, because sometimes when you get them through the forums or through like any like help desk systems, the subject lines can get crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I would definitely just, if you're having that issue, Squarespace has really, really amazing support. If you are a paid Squarespace user, they have incredible support network there. So you could reach out to them and they might be able to look on the back end and make sure there's nothing kind of quirky happening with your contact form. But in the meantime, I would definitely say just like starting a new email would probably be a good way to hopefully kind of break that issue.
So I love this next question from Amanda, because I think it's really important. So do you think it's effective to have testimonials on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it should be one of the most important things, actually, depending on the industry that you're in. Squarespace has some really fun ways of sort of applying text and quotes, and I would encourage you to explore the different design features that they have there. There's a really, really simple quote block that you can use that You can style and sort of make look exactly how you want, but I love that it allows you to style a particular block of text without having that change all the rest of your styles, basically. So if you use that quote block, that's a great one to make a really nice testimonial. I feel like it's often a really nice break in the design of certain pages. So instead of just having a one page where you have all of your testimonials, I would encourage you to kind of like sprinkle them throughout. I feel like it's rare that I would say, it's one thing to say like, go read reviews, because I feel like reviews are something that tend to be a little bit more candid, and I'm going to seek that out. But as far as testimonials go, having it all on one page is kind of like, okay, well, I can go here and read nice things about this person. But actually just, I think kind of having them interrupt areas of text, or, be a break in between, like, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, then I'm going to have a testimonial, and then I'm going to show you my blog. Things like that, where people are sort of accidentally read your testimonials, I think is a great use of them. And then one last thing I'll say about that is that we recently sort of set up a testimonial section for a client using the blog feature on Squarespace. So the nice thing about the blog feature is that basically you can then use the summary block in multiple places with the same content. So if you set up each testimonial as its own blog post, you can then create a summary of that blog post in a certain area. So you could say you have like 3 different services, and you want the particular testimonials that equate to that service to be on different pages that relate to the detailing of those services. You could sort of list all of your testimonials in one blog, and then you can categorize them. You could say, this testimonial is about photography, this testimonial is about planning, this testimonial is about, flower design or whatever. And then you can have on those different areas where you're talking about those things, you could then just pull in a summary and say, only show posts that have this, photography category. And then you've got sort of that easy feed into that area of testimonials. So using the blog feature and then the summary blocks is a really great way to sort of sprinkle information throughout the site without having to sort of create a custom section for all of it, if that makes sense.
I think it makes sense. And I think testimonials are so important, and don't be afraid to ask for them.
Yeah, definitely. That is for sure one of those things that I think sometimes when you look at other people's site, you're like, wow, these people, their clients say really nice things about them. And it's like, they do because they asked.
Right.
Like they said, hey, you're a great client, and you just said something really nice to me face to face. Would you be willing to write that down?
Absolutely. And then those can always be used in, quotes on social media as well, and not just somewhere on your website. So definitely take advantage of those. They're really very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think it looks like all the questions we have for today. But so for everybody who joined us, I threw Campfire & Co.'s website into the chat as well. Go check them out. Their work is awesome. Christy, I can't thank you enough for joining us.
Yeah.
I learned so much even from being here listening just myself. And so I am so glad you could join us. And yeah, definitely. Christy just threw her email in there. So make sure, contact her if you have any questions.
Yeah, I mean, Squarespace is one of those things that it does take a little bit of time to kind of wrap your head around and get the hang of it. But the more time you put in it, the more you learn. And so if there's anything I can help you out with, or you have a question or something, please let me know. I'd love to talk more.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everybody, for taking the time to join us today on your Tuesday afternoon or morning, depending upon where you are. And we'll catch you at the next webinar. Bye.
Thanks so much.